Good job. Okay, thanks. Welcome back to Senate Education, Wednesday, February 8th, 2:51. We now have Farm to School Awareness Day. We really welcome and re-welcome. I had the opportunity to see some of your faces this morning when I wasn't chairing. Now it's game time. And we're really thrilled that you're here. We have an hour, so about 5 minutes, about, I'd say roughly each before we have to move on to something else. But Betsy, do you mind joining us and kicking it off? And really glad you're here. And if you could just sort of set the table around, what everybody's going to hear and why, that would be great.
Okay, great. So my name is Betsy Rosenbluth. I'm the project director of Vermont Feed, which is a farm to school partnership of Shelburne Farms, where I am, and NOFA Vermont. And it is Farm to School and Early Childhood Awareness Day. So we're here to talk about the impact of that on our students, on our farmers, on our communities. And thank you for inviting us in. We are asking you to support the Farm to School and Early Childhood program with a level funded base appropriation of $500,000 for fiscal year 2024, and to support the local purchasing incentive program at $500,000 in base funding. So the governor's budget does include the Farm to School and Early Childhood grants at $500,000. But we just learned that the Agency of Education budget for the governor does not include the local food incentive. So
if I may, while we're on this, new group, new senators who weren't here last year, we did put the $500,000 in last year, correct?
Correct.
So, and that would allow, as we've talked about in this committee, local schools to purchase locally.
Right.
And you're saying that's not in the budget right now?
That is not in the governor's
in
proposal.
The governor's recommend.
Correct.
While we're on this topic, I'm going to look to my left here where Senator Bulick is, who has been asking about small schools in particular as it relates to accessing local foods. And
yeah, I received some correspondence from some folks who were saying that they are in a small town, a small school district, and because of their size, they are unable to access the Farm to School program. Does that make sense to you?
Do you know what district they're in?
Some Wyndham County?
Wyndham? Is it Wyndham School or something?
Could be.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. So I can have my colleague Helen from NOFA Vermont speak.
Okay.
I know for the very, very small schools, you have to be creative in how that happens. So for many small schools, and several of the speakers today can talk about central kitchens that then send the food out to the various schools. That sometimes happens if it's not happening directly in each school. Sometimes very tiny schools will get it from another district. There's some geography challenges if that's the school, and I know we've been trying to figure it out with them for a while. So we can talk about that.
Interesting.
The grants program is open to everyone. The local food incentive is open, but it's for school food authorities, supervisory unions. So they would be part of the larger SU for that program.
okay. Senator Weeks.
For the uninitiated in the
Yes.
group, can you just 10,000 foot view of what is the program? What's the goal of the program? How long has it been in existence? Just some baseline.
Let me give you, let me back up for a few minutes. So Vermont led the nation back in 2007 when we passed the Rosa McLaughlin Farm to School program, which created the first Farm to School grants program. And that program has issued over 200 grants to K-12 schools and early childhood programs. A few years back, we expanded the eligibility beyond schools to include early childhood, since 90% of our brains develop by the time we're 5 years old. And so we know that healthy brain development is essential with good nutrition. That's part of it. And so that is now part of that program. It's administered by the Agency of Agriculture. And Gina is here and she'll talk a little bit more about the impact that she's seen and what's happening with that program. With that, then, 2 years ago, we started a local foods incentive for schools, for K-12 schools, that provides an incentive for increasing local purchasing. And so we recognize that the federal reimbursement in the meal program really has not kept pace. And when it comes to spending those dollars within Vermont, sometimes it costs a little bit more. So it's not a reimbursement for that, but it's an incentive. And you're going to hear from Harley Sterling today in Windham County about how that incentive really catalyzes schools to purchase more local because they get a grant that's bringing money back into their program. So we'll talk about that. Schools spend over $20 million a year buying food. And the goal is to capture more of those dollars into the Vermont economy and spend it with Vermont producers and Vermont farmers. So even 20% of that would be significant. Over 100 farms now across the state sell at least something to schools or early childhood programs. And so we have a nice map on the website we can share with staff so you can see all across the state farms have those relationships. And then the third leg of the stool, so to speak, is universal meals. And that component is ensuring equitable access to all these farm fresh school meals for every student in every zip code across the state. And so we know for many students, half their calories and half of their nutrition is coming from school meals. And so making sure that that's available and all students can enjoy that. And Hunger Free Vermont can share also a lot of information about the impact that just the last 3 years have had on that. I might just jump to this. These three programs then all work together. So this was attached with my testimony and should be in your website, but there's a hard copy that just shows how Farm to School and Universal Meals are increasing participation in the school meal program, which is bringing more dollars, more revenue into those school nutrition programs, which means they have more money to buy local, which is getting more fresh, and excitement from students who are connected to it with the education. Then they're participating in the program, and it's this positive reinforcing cycle that we call the virtuous cycle of Farm to School. So that graphic is just showing you how these three programs are working together in a positive way. And for us, it's really connecting students to what that food does for their health and their bodies and their communities and the economy. So it's benefiting the students, building healthy habits and connections to food, but while also benefiting our farmers. It's the win-win of Farm to School. And I would share just a very brief story I told this morning of talking to the Sodexo staff up at UVM a while ago, and they shared a story with me that they're seeing Vermont kids growing up with Farm to School in Vermont schools. When they get to UVM, they're asking for, where's the local food? Where's the fresh food? And so we know that it's staying with those students.
I could even say at Bennington College, kids that come from in-state, but even out, it's young people are looking for it
Yeah.
more and more at institutions of higher education.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, they understand that, right?
Yeah.
And the connections. We had two students, high school students, just previously in house education. They had to go back to class or they'd be here from Harwood Union High School. But, talking about what it's like to grow up through middle school and high school with Farm to School, understanding the connections, and, it is with those kids, hopefully for life. So I think I'm just going to save time for questions and for our other speakers. So we're going to hear from Food Hub that has been working on how can we best deliver and filling gaps in the supply chain to get that local food to schools. We're going to hear from the Agency of Education and the Agency of Ag. And we have a teacher on Zoom. So it might be easiest if I can announce the next speaker. It's sort of shifting a little bit.
We have Dr. Levine on the list, who's a
Yes, he's
local
next.
celebrity. So yes, we
He's
would
next.
love to hear from Dr. Levine, if that's possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have the school info for you, just if you want it. River Valley's Unified School District, which would include Dover and Wardsboro.
Okay.
Wyndham Central Supervisor Union,
Sorry?
Wyndham Central Supervisor Union, is that what that, Wardsboro and Dover?
Yeah, which is, I guess, part of the River Valley's Unified School
Oh,
District.
that, yeah, okay, that's the school district within
Yeah.
the SU, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, yeah, we're
Okay.
familiar with
All right,
those. Yeah,
thanks.
I'd be happy to speak a little bit more to it later if we got time
Great.
for follow-up.
Yeah, and certainly if there's a legislative fix in any way that would help this situation, we're always all ears for that kind of thing.
Great. Great. So Dr. Levine is next.
Great, thank you. So she's on, okay, great. Dr. Levine, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Good to see you. And with you, I can't quite see the name. Dr. Levine, I could recognize from anywhere. But I'm sorry, your name? Aziza? Okay, and you are not on, so I think we're going to start with Dr. Levine. Great to see you and looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. Mark Levine, Commissioner of Health. I would hate that my celebrity status got me the first place in line here, but I'm happy to pick this off with a few comments that really are focused on some of the things you just heard, because kids' brains are front and foremost for the health department. And really, many issues which you as legislators and policymakers struggle with, whether it be educational achievement gaps or deepening disparities, they have their roots in how well a child is nourished and nurtured at the very earliest points in life. So most of my comments will actually be less at the school level and more on the early childhood experiences like childcare and preschool. But clearly, science can link children's brain and optimal development to high quality nutrition. As you just heard, the first few years of life are the most critical for a significant proportion of brain development, and a great deal of the brain's ultimate structure and capacity is shaped very, very early in life. And there are basically three factors that influence early brain development. Reduction of what we term toxic stress, which are the things that produce adverse childhood experiences. The presence of strong social supports and secure attachment. And then the third, of course, optimal nutrition. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that children need access to nutritious foods. But that doesn't mean many, many Vermont children are not at risk. 2 in 5 Vermonters experienced food insecurity in 2022. That's 40%. So a family's nutrition insecurity can be directly linked to an ability to have access to nutritious foods for the children. About 3/4 of Vermont's children under 6 live in households where parents are working. This means these children will need high-quality childcare during the work week. And of course, if they're going to be benefiting from their childcare program, they're going to need to receive nutritious food during the course of the day. So they will receive lunch and sometimes breakfast every day, which can be really more than half of their total daily calories. So whether we're talking about a child at home or at a childcare or in preschool, it's important that they receive nutritious meals wherever they are. And one of the vehicles for success in that endeavor is farm to early childhood programs. And this, of course, not only supports the families and their children, but also Vermont farmers. Now, let's start to explore exactly how these early childhood programs can help overall child development. First of all, farm to early childhood programs bring local foods to children in childcare programs. So some of these children may have their only opportunity to actually taste fresh fruits and vegetables, things that they haven't maybe experienced in their diet to that point. Obviously, that leads to potentially building healthy nutrition habits, as well as learning more about what's grown in their area. We also know that children actually do let their parents know that they've tried new foods. So that can have an impact on the parents' own nutrition and on the parents' buying habits. And they may be more encouraged then to use these types of foods as part of the family's diet. Children are also getting nutrition education as part of these programs. So they learn about various fruits and vegetables and where they come from. Many of the programs in childcare actually have gardens that children can help with and then eat from. Children are often involved with age-appropriate food preparation tasks. And we know that children that have grown or prepared food are certainly more likely to try those foods. Now, these programs can also, of course, benefit the farm community by providing opportunities for local farms to sell their products locally to these childcare programs, building awareness for families that the farms are nearby and can provide produce and other products for their use at home. And just a quick mention of, there are funding opportunities available to early childhood programs to help them create robust farm and early childhood programs. So there's the Farm to School and Early Childhood Grant, an 18-month program that provides coaching and action planning funding for program teams to implement farm to early childhood strategies while supporting nutrition education and access, family engagement, and community building with local food systems. And then there are CSA grants, community-supported agriculture, that provides 80% of the cost of a CSA share to help early childhood programs, specifically accessing local foods that are fresh, building community and relationships with the farming community, and exposing children, staff, and their families to local foods. So in summary, these programs support the early childhood system by offering access to nutritious foods where children are during their day, supporting high-quality childcare, providing nutrition security and access to families, and offering educational opportunities to help shape children's current and future eating habits, and really their preferences over the course of a lifetime, since so much is determined in those critical early childhood years. I'll stop there and see if there's any specific questions, or we can move on to some of the other speakers.
Any questions for Dr. Levine? Doctor, I think the only thing I would say is if there is a particular piece of research that you think the committee should see around this issue, if you would forward it along to us, that would be great. We'll be talking to our colleagues. If we get the Universal School Meals Bill out, we'll be talking to them about those early years. We'll be sharing numbers around things related to, how important it is to have access to, farm fresh vegetables, et cetera. So any particular research would be helpful.
Yeah, I will have my administrative assistant forward to you during the course of this meeting Journal of Pediatrics publication talking about the role of nutrition in brain development, especially in the
Right.
first 3 years.
Great. Thank you. Great to see you, Dr. Levine. Really appreciate you weighing in on this.
No problem. I'll hang out for a short time. Thank you.
Thank you. Gina, oh, please. Yes.
I'm
that's it.
sorry.
Yes, no.
We had the folks at school, it's a little awkward. The student had to go, another
Yes.
teacher dropped out, but Aziza Malik
Oh, Aziza, terrific.
was on. Yeah, is she still on?
Yeah, she's down.
Okay.
Hi, Aziza. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
You're a
Great to
teacher at
see you.
Champlain Elementary?
Thanks for having me.
Great to
My
see
name is
you.
Aziza Malik, and I'm a 5th grade teacher at Champlain Elementary in Burlington. So I wrote down some stuff, so I'm going to read this to you today. I am speaking to you today to ask for you to support the Farm to School and Early Childhood Program with a level funded base appropriation of $500,000 for fiscal year 2024, and to support the local purchasing initiative incentive program for schools at $500,000 in base funding. I believe in the Farm to School Early Childhood programs as being a critical connector, bringing farmers and educators together so that children and youth can experience local food, have nutritious meals, and learn about where their food comes from. When I first started at Champlain, which was about 13 years ago, our gardens were in disrepair. There was no connection between our gardens and the cafeteria, classroom, or the community. Students' access to garden programming was limited to whether or not their classroom teacher was willing and able to take on a garden plot. Many classroom teachers were interested in incorporating garden-based learning into their curriculum, but were simply overwhelmed by the task in the absence of systems to support it. Those who were dedicated would lug in things from home like food processors, cutting boards, extra shovels, rakes. We'd spend our own money out of pocket to purchase supplemental ingredients, and all of our planning was done in isolation and outside of the regular workday. Fast forward a couple of years, we had an amazing opportunity come up with the Northeast Farm to School Institute. This transformational program is made possible through this funding and allowed us to bring stakeholders together from the classroom, cafeteria, and community to create those systems that we were really desperately in need of. We were able to create an action plan and formed a Farm to School committee with the objective of connecting those three things: the classroom, community, and cafeteria. Now we have the time, money, and expert advice necessary to develop a curriculum that includes reading, writing, math, history, science, and to bring the learning and products from the outside into the school. Every single classroom now uses the garden for hands-on learning. So we went from just having 1 or 2 teachers bringing all these things in, doing things in isolation, to now every single classroom, pre-K through 5th grade, is working in the gardens. And this isn't only for our school, but throughout the entire school district, which is 6 elementary schools that we're working with, 2 middle schools and 1 high school, all connected together now. Here at our school, students are harvesting kale that they bring to the cafeteria to get turned into kale chips that is then served in the cafeteria. They're eating cherry tomatoes straight off the vine. They're harvesting peppermint tea that we use for tea during reading time in our classrooms. And we share it with special guests. Our gardens have expanded significantly to include plants that directly connect to our curriculum. Our 2nd grade students recently studied pollinators in a 9-week-long research period. We worked with the community to not only create a report, but they designed a pollinator garden to enhance the gardens, to attract pollinators that are beneficial to the garden and vice versa, making it more productive and getting that hands-on learning in a way that books are great, but this just adds a whole nother element to it. We also now have a cooking cart that's stocked with supplies, a team that works on lesson plans, and a full-time employee who's able to plan and deliver instruction. It's just really, really incredible. Just thinking the status of the schools these days and what that means to teachers who are overwhelmed, we're understaffed, to have access to all of this and to get our kids outside and getting learning in this hands-on way is just simply incredible. Our coordinator works really closely with the school chef to help develop recipes, do taste tests that use the produce directly from the garden. In addition, we've really had a focus on even increasing equity within the garden. We've added crops and recipes that really are representative of all students. So we've added, for example, heirloom Abenaki crops. We've also worked closely with the Association of Africans Living in Vermont and gotten recipes from our newest Americans into the garden. So we have those crops here. We've been developing recipes around those as well. We also planted those Abenaki seeds that I was talking about and recently harvested them this last fall to then create a squash soup that then was served to the entire school. So just amazing connections, getting that hands-on learning in history, science, all sorts of things, plus learning valuable skills of cooking and gardening at the same time. Students and families are invested in our garden. They understand the importance of native plants. They're willing to try new foods. Gardening really brings our community together. This funding has been transformational for our school community. I'm just asking that you please support the Farm to School and Early Childhood program. I couldn't be happier that it's around and couldn't advocate for it more if I tried. Love it. So thank you very much, and let me know if you have any other questions.
Any questions? Please.
Hi, Aziza, it's Martine.
Hi.
I just wanted to say hello and thank you for all you do. You are a fabulous teacher, a rock star educator, and please say hello to all of my friends at Champlain Elementary.
I definitely will. Nice to see you.
Thanks for your testimony.
Aziza, say a word or two about universal school meals and how they're going at the school, whether or not it's working or not.
That is actually something that also has been quite transformational, because previously it was, you know, kids would get like big bills and some kids wouldn't eat. We have the most amazing school staff that our cafeteria workers would make it work for every kid, but it has just simplified it so much and made it so much more equitable. And I see more and more kids eating the meals and really having the fresh fruit program too. I think that's included in here as well. Getting like a big thing every single day of a fresh fruit from somewhere. Kids are devouring it, eating so much fresh fruit and vegetables. They are fighting over carrots and, you know, like want to eat the last one. And it's just really, really exciting to see that. And I just love the way that it just levels the playing field for everyone. Everyone is eating those meals irregardless of who you are. So that's been a huge game changer.
Aziza, I did think of one question. I'm trying to get other schools and other districts to adopt gardening programs like we have in Burlington, because they've got all this wide open land. One of the problems that people always bring up is like, who tends the gardens in the summer? So do you just have volunteers from the community that do that?
Yeah. We do a combination of things. So we definitely utilize volunteers, but we also have a really strong farm to school program where at some of our other schools, so one of the big game changers has been that we've actually had some time to talk as a district. And now we have this full-time employee that works year round. So we have a direct connection with our food services program. And we have someone who's working on the curriculum and kind of connecting the purchasing and food, kind of connecting the 3 C's that we talked about, the cafeteria, classroom, and community together. So in the summertime, there's a program, there's Fork in the Road. And so those students are in a work training program where they're gardening, they're learning how to prepare food, and they sell it in a food truck. And those students are employed to go from garden to garden and make sure that the maintenance has been done. So we have a partnership with them where they do a good bulk of the weeding and caring for the garden, but we also have community volunteers that come in and water the garden and do other additional supports.
Thank you.
But that's a huge thing because it is, teachers aren't there in the summer, the students aren't there in the summer. So utilizing it when it's most productive. We've also connected with some of the summer programming as well, like some of the summer camps use it as well.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Feel free to stick around. Your schedule may have you going off, but
yeah.
if you have a few minutes, feel free to stay with us.
Yeah, I snuck out of a meeting to come, so I better get going, but it was really nice to see you all. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Karen?
Gina Clitheroe.
Okay. Oh, there you are. Yeah. Welcome.
Thanks. Hi,
Hi.
Gina Clitheroe, Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Farm to Institution Program Manager. I'm here to talk about the grants program, the Farm to School and Early Childhood program that multiple folks have mentioned already in testimony. So I'm just here to kind of fill in the details, but I'd like to share our fiscal year 2022 report showing the impacts of the most recent round of investments. So as Betsy mentioned, in 2007, this grant program started. We offer through the Rosa McLaughlin Act, the Agency of Agriculture offers grants on an annual basis to early childcare and K through 12 schools through this grant program. Over the duration of the program so far, over 200 grants have gone out and 1.6 million in state funds have been invested through these grants. And as Aziza really clearly laid out, these funds focus across the 3 C's of Farm to School, which is Farm to School in the classroom, community, and cafeteria. So within the Farm to School grants program, there are 3 grants programs within that. The first is the Farm to School and Early Childhood Grants Program. The second is the CSA Grants Program, or Community Supported Agriculture, and the last is the Vision Grant. The Farm to School and Early Childhood Grant is the program's flagship funding opportunities that are on for a long time, and it is a capacity building grant focused on building sustainable and holistic programs at schools and early care centers. It takes a team-based approach to doing so. Oftentimes there's educators, students, and administrators and farmers and family members all on this Farm to School team. And the average award is around $10,000, and that's a package award of financial assistance on average $10,000, and then also robust technical assistance that really helps teams implement that project effectively with expertise from around meal program viability, local procurement experts, and school gardens, and also in curriculum development. So our partners for that grant program are Northeast Organic Farming Association, NOFA Vermont, Shelburne Farms, Hunger Free Vermont, and Vermont Garden Network. And then folks also get coaches. So you get a coach to work with you one-on-one throughout your grant, and you have access to these technical assistance experts, and you have the financial award. And this combination of money, mentorship, and expertise is a proven model to really support the development of these programs over time. The second grant program, this one's new. Both of the other programs are newer. They started in 2021. The CSA grant, or the Community Supported Agriculture Grant, subsidizes the cost of CSAs or farm shares by 80% for early childhood education providers and after school programs. This grant is smaller. The average award is only $800, but there is a direct benefit tying both to the farmer and also to the educator and the students who get to engage with this local food. And in addition to that, it's a grant that's really right-sized for smaller programs. So it's a really unique opportunity, and we've seen that grant program be really highly sought after. We awarded 28 grants in fiscal year 2022 through that program. And we've also seen folks start off with the CSA grant and then come back and actually apply for our fiscal year 2023 funds for the Farm to School and Early Childhood Grant Program and be successful in obtaining that. The last grant program is the Vision Grant Program. This program is to support innovative and impactful projects that are kind of going to propose outside the box solutions to contemporary problems, whether it's climate change, food insecurity, food sovereignty, racial injustice. And these are youth-centered projects, and the idea is that these projects can be replicated and scaled across the state. And that's been a really exciting area of innovation in the program so far. This one also started up in 2021, so we've granted 2 grants so far through that program, 1 each year. We granted 1 this year in 2022 to Fairfield Community Association, and there's a little story about them at the back here of the report on page 11. $16,000. So over the course of fiscal year 2022, the most recent year of the grant program, $190,000 has been invested through these programs, and also supporting for the New England Farm to School Institute coaching program, which you'll see here was one component of the expenses budget here on page 5. We were really excited that Governor Phil Scott and the Vermont State Legislature increased the program budget for the Farm to School Grants Program for last year to $500,000, and that's for fiscal year 2023. And we're still working through those funds, so we don't have a full report on how that's all gone out the door just yet. Like I said, we have these 3 grant programs. One of them opened in the fall, and so we have impacts to share on that one already. We've granted twice the number of farm to school and early childhood grants, that flagship opportunity that we were able to fund last year because of this increase to the base funding. And we are anticipating awarding 60 CSA grants this year in comparison to the 28 that we offered last year. And we are allocating $150,000 to the Vision grant budget. So looking to support several high impact, scalable, replicable projects this year in that program as well. So yeah, it's an exciting time for the Farm to School and Early Childhood program and the Agency of Agriculture and the network to see this growth, and excited to share more next session as we get to see the full effect of the $500,000 in the annual budget.
Senator Hashim, have you been to Dummerston School? It looks like there are a lot of, that's Wyndham County, correct?
I pick up and drop off my daughter there, so
Yeah.
on a daily basis. Yeah.
Looks like a
They're
lot
pretty
of good stuff is happening around local foods there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's great.
Yeah, they received a 2022 grant from the Farm to School and Early Childhood program.
Great. Yeah. Terrific. Questions? Senator Wayne.
So I was a NOFA certified vegetable farmer from 2008 to 12. And I got out of it because I couldn't make a living at it. So how are we making sure that the farms that want to get involved in this program get the information they need and actually get an equitable share of getting their vegetables to market? That was part of the problem with that, because we have such a short growing season. Unless you've got plastic, plus you can grow under a greenhouse, that you're competing with everybody else's. I know if you ever hear of the Bare Roots Co-op, they had a program that was excellent, and I followed that when I started getting involved with the actually it was Master Gardener's course. Vern Grubinger, had a couple meetings with him. They made sure that everybody, okay, you're going to be in the co-op, you're going to grow potatoes, but I grow beautiful tomatoes. Well, we want you to grow potatoes. So, and if we need, somebody has a blight or whatever, your tomatoes, we'll buy your tomatoes too. So I'm just concerned that everybody that wants to be involved in it, because you're talking about taxpayer money, is going to get a chance to participate.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great question, and I totally
it sounds like a lot of the money's going to school programs.
Yes.
Where they actually have their own gardens, and I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But if I'm also looking at, maybe we can make some distribution out to some of the local farmers.
Yeah. Well, the CSA grant program, which is a smaller grant program, but that funding does directly benefit farms, because if they're partnering with an early child care provider, the early child care providers, being reimbursed for that cost of signing up for CSA. But I think that some of my other colleagues, I think Becca with the Green Mountain Farm to School, can really talk a lot about the process for onboarding producers and supporting them in accessing institutional markets. Definitely an important market outlet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Gina, you're with the agency.
I am.
Perhaps also just something you'd go back and ask any of your colleagues who might be able to also respond to Senator Williams' question, in an email. What else is out there to support our farmer? I mean, I know there are a range of grants, but just to give him an idea of what's out there, that would be great.
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to do so. We certainly have a lot of grants at the agency of ag, and there's stuff beyond too. So yeah, happy to reach out.
I just looked at your map, and I think my farm is still on there, but I'm not NOFA certified.
I didn't know that you had a farm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great to know. Yeah. Senator Weeks.
So in your program overview, you did a couple of kind of administrative items that were required for program management and such. That's, you know, that's, and I assume that comes out of the grant money. And that's all, that's appropriate. I'd like to kind of flip this around 180 degrees and take the perspective of the school. What are the elements in the school itself which require funding to exercise the program? You can take that perspective, not the agency, but coming back from the school, looking at the agency. How are the funds utilized at a local level?
So are you asking, I apologize, Senator, are you asking what type of, like, how much staff time is needed to manage the grant and apply for the grant?
Yeah, I don't want to color it at all, because I don't know what the costs are from the school perspective. So
Right.
there's money being allocated, some of it's being utilized by the agency to run the program. So, you know, it's appropriate. But does the school benefit do the dollars actually go to the school? And if yes, what in the school are they using the money for on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so within the 500,000 that's allocated for fiscal year 2023 and the 190, none of that is going to the Agency of Agriculture for administration
Okay.
of that program. The question around the budgets, they vary a lot based on what the project needs are for each school, specifically for that farm to school and early childhood grant that can kind of be a lot of things, but sometimes it'll fund, you know, garden equipment or professional development for staff to learn about how they can integrate into the curriculum, or to pay for subs even, so that teachers have the time and space to engage in professional development around farm to school curriculum integration. There's probably some other examples that other folks could share, but equipment for, you know, processing food in the kitchen, mobile kitchen projects. I think we had someone testify about that earlier today. So yeah, a wide variety of projects can be supported.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Right?
Yep.
I don't know if Connor's here or Harley wants to jump in.
Hey there.
Oh, there's one, okay, with the Agency of Education. So the local food initiative is administered through the Agency of Education.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there. For the record, my name is Connor Floyd. I'm the grant program manager for the child nutrition programs team at the Agency of Education. And I'll be providing a brief overview of the local foods incentive. This is the second year that the local foods incentive grant program has been operating. This is a state-funded grant program with a $500,000 appropriation. And the grant program is split up into two separate tracks to help get schools kind of ready for the program. And so when a school food authority, which is just an organization of schools, usually at the supervisory or school district level, chooses to apply, they're going to start with a baseline year grant. That baseline year grant is a couple simple questions that's really getting schools thinking about what they need to do and what they need to prepare for to shift their purchasing and be successful in the grant program. It's really there to be a support. And so every application for a baseline year grant that we've received, we will review and maybe provide some feedback, but they've all been approved. And so that gives schools a 15 cents per lunch grant award for that baseline year. And the intention there is for it to be a little bit of some seed funding to help schools cover that increased cost of purchasing local, which is going to be required to qualify for those subsequent year grants. After a school food authority has successfully applied for a baseline year grant, every following year will be a subsequent year grant. And that's when it's a performance-based award. Schools need to track their local purchasing, and we review that documentation. We'll ask for some backup receipts just to confirm that the numbers that they report are accurate. For the subsequent years, there's 3 award tiers. And so school food authorities must at least hit 15% local purchasing. If they do that, they'll receive 15 cents per lunch served. The next tier is 20%, where they'll get 20 cents per lunch. And then the highest tier is 25% local purchasing, which results in a 25 cents per lunch award. This year, to kind of help get the word out and prepare schools for this, we partnered with Vermont Feed and a couple of food service directors to host a webinar training during our Summer Institute, which is the period in August when we're preparing schools for the coming year. And that training gave an overview of what's going to be required of the grant, provided some context in terms of what an audit would look like of their applications. We don't want any surprises for folks that apply. We want them to be prepared with the documentation that we need to verify those applications. And then we have the food service directors on that call as well to provide some insights into their purchasing strategies and just ways for, stretching their budget and still purchasing local. We also have put out quite a few guidance resources, both through memos and different pages on our website that explain the different aspects of the program. And then finally, in designing all of the different pieces that make up the local foods incentive, we've worked really closely with food service directors, food hubs, nonprofit partners. We recognize that food service directors are already really stretched thin. And so to add another grant program for some is a really big ask. Inherently in this grant, there's a lot of work between tracking all of those foods separately, keeping all those receipts, getting some product documentation that demonstrates that it is indeed Vermont local. And so we really, beyond the core requirements we need to ensure program integrity, we've been really mindful of trying to keep things simple. And, we've done that by the application for a subsequent year grant is built right into a financial report that we already have to collect, right? And so instead of needing to submit a whole separate application for a subsequent year grant, there's just a few extra lines in a financial report that school food authorities complete. So we're doing things like that to try to really make it as low impact as possible. One thing that has come up quite a bit is thinking about what does local mean, right? And that's a question we often get from school food authorities when they're just beginning, and is sometimes a point of confusion. And so the grant uses the Agency of Agriculture's Vermont local definition, which has 3 categories of product, and there's pretty specific requirements to meet those local criteria. We discovered when starting to implement this that there's not an existing list of what counts as local. There's no one checking or approving those. So we were really starting from scratch. The approach we've taken with the question of what is local and what isn't is we put that on producers. And so Vermont Feed has been really helpful in collecting letters from producers verifying that their products are local. Vermont Feed has created an open database for schools, so it's easy to check there. And schools also always have the option to reach directly out to a producer to ask for one of those letters. Once we see that there's that letter verifying that it's local, at the Agency of Education, we don't do any more digging there. We take that at face value. So briefly looking at this past year's results of the local foods incentive. This was, again, the second year. So it's the first year that there were some school food authorities that could apply for a subsequent year grant. There were 23 that were eligible, which means they applied for a baseline year, the previous year. Of those 23, 15 applied. And of those 15, 6 had local purchasing percentages that were 15% or higher. And so there are 6 school food authorities that are going to receive a subsequent year grant award, assuming that the audits that we're conducting right now all passed and that everything that was reported was accurate there. The other 9 school food authorities, right, they tracked their local, they did everything they needed to, and their numbers just didn't hit that 15% threshold. But in their financial report, they still reported those numbers to us, which we appreciate because it gives us a context of the full picture of what schools are purchasing. There were 8 school food authorities that could have applied for a subsequent year but didn't. And then there were an additional 8 school food authorities that applied for a baseline year. So it's their first year engaging with the grant program. In total, there was just under $340,000 in funding requested. And so we anticipate to award about that much. That is, well below the $500,000 appropriation for the program. But as Harley can attest to later on, it takes a while to really shift your purchasing. And so the schools that are currently at that 15% or higher, they've likely been doing local purchasing for much longer than this past year, right? And it's just the first year that it's being demonstrated through this grant program. As the years continue, we anticipate that funding request to increase as more schools become eligible. And so at this point, despite being a little low right now, I think it's that $500,000 appropriation. It feels like the right fit for the time being. Finally, 2 other things to highlight. One is that 27% was the highest local purchasing percentage, and that was Wyndham Northeast's local purchasing percentage. Harley's coming up right after me, and so he can speak more to his efforts. He can say, he didn't start purchasing local, and their program's been doing this for a long time. It didn't just start this year. So it's been a lot of work to get there. And then of the 15 schools that did apply and recorded their local food budgets, that accounts for right around $775,000 of Vermont local food purchased. And so that's just a good number to track as we go. And as more schools apply and we get more data reported, I'm sure that number will grow. And so I will leave it there, but I'm happy to answer any questions folks may have.
Connor, one of the things that came up this morning in the Ag Committee, and I'd like you and Rosie Kruger perhaps to come back next week and share with the committee. We're not getting the forms from so many families that we need to draw down money from the feds for universal school meals. And there was talk from the chair of Ag and others, can that form become a little livelier? Can we do more outreach? Can it say something at the bottom? Support your local farmer, fill this form out, something. So I'm gonna have Hayden reach out to you and have you come in just maybe next Thursday for a little update on that. We would appreciate it.
Yeah, that would, Rosie's my supervisor, Rosie, the director's the best fit there. I don't work on those forms, but she's been working really closely on the Universal Meals Initiative.
We're putting it on you now, Connor. We'll see you next Thursday.
Okay.
If you don't want to do it, you might want to talk to Rosie.
I'll check in with her and we'll have something ready for you.
We really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Great. Yeah, so we have about 15 minutes, just so you know. We have a hard stop because we have to finish our testimony. Committee members have something at 4:30. So
all right, I'll be as quick as possible. Thank you, Chair, Senators. Senator Hashim, great to see you.
You too. I almost didn't recognize you with the suit. I recognize you with the chef stuff on.
Yeah, I'm dressed like a grown-up today for the occasion. So I just want to echo all of the points made in this great testimony earlier. I'm here to ask the committee to support the local purchasing incentive, $500,000 in base funding, and the Farm to School grant program, $500,000. I also want to thank the legislature for all of the work they've done to support the Universal School Meals Program. I shared testimony in the House Ed Committee last month that was just really compelling. I reached out to constituents at my schools if they wanted to share any stories for me to bring, and the response was overwhelming and from a very diverse group of stakeholders, from nurses, parents, grandparents, teachers, principals. I made a joke that it's pretty hard to get people in schools to agree on anything. I think we had 23 emails back and forth about when to reschedule school picture day. So it was a real testament You don't often see something that everyone thinks is just a win-win-win, but universal school meals and, as I'll try to explain, local purchasing and these farm to school programs are as close to a win-win as I've ever seen. So I just want to stay in my lane and speak about the local purchasing incentive in schools and what I've seen this year. The grant has been, I hate to use the word game changer, but I don't have another term. It has totally changed the landscape and the conversations that I'm having with other school food directors across the state. They're all really engaged with trying to make this local thing happen. And as Connor pointed out, they didn't give out the full grant this year, but so many people were right on the cusp. And so many people are just getting started, trying to start building these systems, find these recipes. How did you do that? What did you do? We bought a potato peeler in our district to start doing more local potatoes, because if you've ever worked with local organic potatoes seconds, you know they're little green golf balls sometimes. And you don't have 4 labor hours to peel potatoes. Things like that are happening there's just great stories from around the state. Scott Fay shared from Essex Westford that they bought a beef burger patty press, and they're making their own beef burgers. So that would represent a very large scale of how to do this. But in our very rural, small districts, we're trying to do it on a smaller scale, show that it can be done in schools with only 70 kids maybe. But that those same systems will scale to our high school that has like 350 representative of a lot of districts in Vermont. So I see so much value in this program. We've always heard people message that they buy local, and there's always been, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And so to finally have these data that is like, here's the numbers, here's the receipts. It's been a wake-up call for some folks that are realizing, whoa, that's actually kind of hard to buy 15% local, but it's doable. And here's the districts that are doing it and making it happen. How do we get there? How do we get that for our school? How do we get, some of the best food in the world that's grown here in Vermont that goes to all these fancy restaurants? How do we get that same food in the communities where it's grown? Fed to, a group that maybe that's 50% of the calories they're getting that day. I can certainly attest in my district. I know that there's kids that's the only food they're getting that day. That's really been our mission before this grant existed, was to try to build these systems out and be a model for other school districts. And this grant has enabled that just tenfold. And the value of the return on that $500,000 in grants, or $340,000 this year, as Helen said, over 700,000 in local food was purchased. But that is only going to grow. And if we had every school district in Vermont at 15 or 20%, I mean, that's a big number. And Senator Williams, to address your question from earlier, having the school, which is probably the largest restaurant in town, in most towns, be engaged with their local farmers is the best way to ensure that every farmer who has product available can start to build those relationships. I know I hear from people all the time. It's like, I grow potatoes, I grow maples, I do sugaring. We have lots of those direct relationships, but then we also have the food hubs and the logistics starting to grow around the state to service some of the bigger districts as well. So I'm just really enthusiastic about this. I think it's a really great investment, and I hope that this body will continue to support.
I didn't want to sound selfish, but my farm was still there. I had some health issues, so the farm's been fallow. I had interns from Green Mountain College in Pullman.
Yeah.
They were the #1 sustainability college, so they went under. And the problem was finding help, because I was a one-man operation, and they provided some pretty good help. They were really interested in growing good quality food, and maybe, is there any way that we could extend this program into students that like to work in the school garden, and maybe extending it during the summer months to help the farmers on the farm?
Yeah, we heard testimony earlier just about how engaging it is to students when they're involved in growing the food. If they get to do a school project where they're in the garden and they grow a pepper, that's where they're trying things that they maybe they would never try otherwise. Because it's all about stories, and this gives them the stories. Like, I grew this pepper.
Yeah.
And so like at our elementary schools that have these robust farm to school programs, you just see their salad bar participation is off the charts. Kids are just throwing stuff on there. And by the time they get through school to 6th grade, they're salad bar experts, and they go on to our other schools. And you can notice a difference from the different schools that feed into our middle and high school. Like, they don't have as much of a farm to school program. Some of these kids are experiencing, they're starting from a later date. So, yeah.
If we can grow it right here, why should we ship it from 3,000 miles away?
Exactly.
Right? So,
Yeah, so,
sorry.
no, it's fine. In addition to gardening, which I get the linkage between the kids and the growing and the food and the habits, I get all that, but I'm going to take a kind of a corporate perspective on what you're doing, what everybody's advocating. So in the corporate world, when we want to change some behaviors, we put that responsibility back on vendors. We require vendors in contract language to change their habits. Okay. So for example, in this case, if the goal is to achieve 20% local purchasing, I assume that schools, like a lot of larger institutions, use companies like Cisco and such so wouldn't it be a simpler solution to, in the request for proposal from a food vendor, to say, look, you now have a mandate for 20% local production, or local, including 20% local food production into this business relationship.
Yes.
Go forth.
Yes.
Solve it, come back with, with how you're going to do this, and basically just kind of like not make it your responsibility to figure out a new method to source, green beans from Williams Farm or whatever the case might be. They do it for you, and then Department of Agriculture or Education or whomever agency that then takes that, and they just validate, okay, it's happening that way. I'm just curious why it's like 180-degree difference, because it's a public institution as opposed to a private institution.
What you're saying totally makes sense. And there's a lot of people who are involved in this at the state level with the food directors buying group, and people involved in procurement who are doing this work. And what I would say is that this grant has given schools an incentive to want to buy more local and back it up with documentation. And what that is in turn doing is creating the market pressure on these larger vendors that now we need to find a way to get more local on our trucks so that they can compete with the food hubs or whomever, or even the larger districts who just don't have time to have 37 direct relationships with farmers. I need it to be on my Cisco truck or PFG truck. That is happening. And I just can't emphasize enough that like we are so early in this process. So many good things are just getting started. It is only going to continue, and those relationships are only going to become more robust. And I do see that happening, where more local is going to be offered. It's already happening.
Okay, I just want to make one more caveat that so in this case, this is a state-funded, supported initiative to change a behavior, but in the other model, the corporate model, that cost is absorbed by the vendor, and comes from a state perspective, becomes a flat cost. It's not a cost that is needed to be absorbed. And I'm just kind of curious why.
Well, you're preaching to the choir, because we've tried to really buy local without even bragging about it. But what the grant has really done has just changed. Like, you can say we buy local. We're a Vermont farm to school cafeteria program. And like, you don't have to do very much to prove that or back that up. And it's very effective, cost effective to kind of local wash and say like, yeah, we do all this great stuff, but to actually purchase local from Vermont farms in a systematic way, it just requires all of these different support systems, I think, and to get to where you're talking about getting, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. You want to do
Thank you.
some wrap up? We've got about 4 more minutes.
Sure.
So any concluding comments or new information?
Yeah,
Would be
absolutely.
great.
I know we're really short on time. I'm hoping to clear up some of your questions about how these programs benefit our farms and small businesses and food producers, and some of your questions about how this works within the procurement and the supply chain levels. My name is Becca Perrin. I'm the account manager for Green Mountain Farm Direct. We're a local mission-driven nonprofit food hub. So we're the intermediary between schools that want to purchase local and the local farms. So to speak to your question, Cisco is an enormous corporation that is, its bottom line is fed by sourcing the cheapest product possible and shipping it as far as it needs to go. Meanwhile, we are doing the work to create relationships with these local producers and make sure that they're being opened up to these new markets, which are being created by grants such as these, which give schools the funds to purchase local. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do. But first I'll ask that you please support the Farm to School and Early Childhood Program with a level funded base appropriation of $500,000. And also please support the Local Purchasing Incentive Program at $500,000 base funding. So we are a aggregation and distribution service. And we source a wide range of products from over 50 Vermont-based producers, from fruits and vegetables, dairy, eggs, meat, soy products, beans and flour, maple and honey, pickles and other value-added products. And we service 72 school accounts across 18 supervisory unions and 5 private schools and early education centers. We broadly serve northern Vermont, so there are other food hubs that serve the other areas of the whole state is covered by food hubs. Not all of them use food hubs. Not all SUs in the state do, but these programs help schools to utilize the services that food hubs provide. In the Northeast Kingdom, where we service, many schools are rural with enrollments under 100 and tiny procurement budgets. So given these barriers, local purchasing is often a challenge, but the local purchasing incentive is a direct response to the challenge. And I included an example in my testimony about Caledonia Central Supervisory Union that we saw bounce back from the COVID-19 school year to this past school year. And we saw them bounce back to purchasing locally raised ground beef from NEK Meat Producer Rose Slaughterhouse in Troy, Vermont, locally grown and stone ground wheat flour from Morningstar Farms in Glover, and carrots from Pete's Greens in Craftsbury. And all 52 of our Vermont-based farmers and producers were directly benefited by the sales increase that we saw after the local food purchasing incentive was launched. But especially our small-scale vegetable growers like St. Joe's Brook Farm in St. Johnsbury, Heartwood Farm in South Albany, and West Farm in Jeffersonville. So we're seeing real data that supports local farms and producers being supported by this incentive program. This is the broad strokes. Any questions? Yes.
I did have clarity on my earlier question. I guess the issue that my constituent is having is around the minimum order size.
Yeah, that's a really great question that
Yeah.
comes up, especially with the tinier schools.
Yeah, so I guess he was hoping that maybe that could go away so that it could be more equitable to the smaller schools.
So right now they can't get the money because they're just so small.
Apparently, or they can't get the food.
So it's like delivery is the issue,
Yeah,
it's a
right.
minimum delivery amount. Sometimes it's $200, sometimes it's $400, it depends on the distributor.
Is there a way to fix that? Because.
There are a couple ways around it. Yeah.
Okay.
There are drop shipments. So if we're talking about an SU that has let's say five schools, if they all
Sorry, is it
pool,
part of an issue?
Yes.
Okay.
so they can pool their orders, so all the schools can go in on one order and then distribute as needed afterwards. There are also ways for them to order up and get foods that will last longer than a week, so they can maximize their order that way. Depending on the food hub that would service them, there are a couple workarounds. What's the SU again? Wyndham's. Oh yeah, Food Connects would be the
Yeah,
ones
it's the
to
River Valley.
Yeah.
talk to.
Yeah.
Yep, the West River Valley.
Yeah.
Do you do anything with the local distribution companies like White River and Black River produce?
We
as
don't-
far as distribution?
Right, we don't work with them.
Okay,
As far as I know, they don't do much with schools. They deliver local produce to retailers and co-ops. They're a competitor of ours. But again, we are finding a market with this local food specifically because we spend so much time creating relationships with producers and making sure that we're supporting them that way.
it almost makes sense that if you went to some kind of a co-op, statewide co-op, to find out who had, you know, who was gonna grow the vegetables and maybe even contract with it. Might be something to think about with the ag department. It just made the Air Roots Co-op I talked about, and I think it was in Brattleboro. That was such a concept, was such a great concept that helped the farmers and it made sure markets had fresh local food.
Thank you all for joining us. We very much appreciate it. This was very helpful.
Thank you.
And we look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks so
Great,
much.
thank you.
Would you mind,
Yes,
Senator, give me just one sentence?
Yeah, please.
Just a final plug, for the record, my name is Helen Burkett from the Northeast Organic Farming Association, and together with Sheldon Farms, we run the Vermont Feed Project. I'll share my remarks and I can pass them along to the committee assistant, or I'll save my remarks, but really we just want to underscore that we've learned today that the $500,000 appropriation for this really transformative, revolutionary local purchasing incentive program has not been included
Right.
in the governor's budget. So we would really like to reiterate that request that you support the $500,000 base appropriation for fiscal year 2024.
and I believe that's changed since this morning, right?
Yes, this
Because I
morning
would
we were-
reiterate that. I would
Yes.
reach out to the chair of
Yes, we
agriculture
will.
as well.
Thank
Great,
you very much. We
great.
will do
Yeah,
that.
great.
We learned that information in our
Right in
last
between, right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much.
Great, great
Please let
work.
us know if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great committee. I think Beth St. James is probably right outside here. We're going to jump into
You're gonna be on Zoom.
Act 173.
See you around.
I don't.
Still live, so.
Oftentimes, you say, I want to hear this. I was like, oh, okay, you wait. For Beth.
For Beth. Oh, yeah, this is, yeah.
So I sent you an invitation.
Just for her,
About-
yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Is Beth coming in now?
I think so.
Okay, great. Why don't you take us off until she comes in? Get started.